The UN Security Council holds a rare meeting on Kashmir. The India-controlled region has been on virtual lockdown for 12 days. Some phone services are reportedly being restored today. The turmoil continues in Hong Kong. The CEO of Cathay Pacific announces his resignation after pressure from Beijing. This as protesters remain in the streets. And a fresh crackdown in Zimbabwe. Police tear gas opposition protesters who've gathered in Harare in defiance of a government ban today. Good evening and welcome to the newsroom in Paris. I'm Nadia Massi. The UN Security Council is meeting today to discuss the situation in Kashmir. Parts of the India-controlled region have been on virtual lockdown for over a week now. Phone lines and the internet have both been cut, although some phone services are being reinstated today. That is according to a regional official there. The Security Council meeting taking place is a highly unusual one. The body hasn't held a full closed-door session on Kashmir since 1965. Well, earlier I asked our international affairs editor Armin Georgian what might come out of this meeting.
The fact that the Security Council hasn't discussed Kashmir in this format since, as you said, for several decades now that it hasn't talked about it. The fact that the Prime Minister of Pakistan secured such a meeting, that's already an achievement in itself. However, Imran Khan effectively acknowledged earlier this week that previous UN statements and resolutions have not changed the reality for Kashmiris. You might remember on that visit to Kashmir a few days ago, he said, "Does the UN only work when the powerful want it to?" And he referenced the 11 Security Council resolutions on Kashmir. So what about the powerful? What are they saying? And when we say powerful, obviously, we mean the veto-wielding members of the Security Council. Well, we've heard already going into this meeting Russia's deputy UN ambassador who says this is a bilateral issue, so a non-interventionist stance there from Russia, not entirely surprising. It will be interesting to watch China's position in the next couple of hours. China is traditionally Pakistan's ally, and China says it's very concerned about the situation, gravely concerned. There was a meeting between China's state councillor and the Pakistani foreign minister a few days ago, but the question really is how far is China willing to go, given that the other permanent members of the Security Council are not particularly backing Pakistan. The US is not showing strong support at the moment. Russia, as I said, not seeking intervention. The UK, as the former colonial power, is treading carefully between India and Pakistan and calling for calm. And I think we can reasonably expect France to make similar calls for calm.
Yeah, that was Armin Georgian talking to me a little earlier on the programme. Next, the CEO of the Hong Kong-based airline Cathay Pacific has resigned today unexpectedly, this after pressure from Beijing. China had criticised the flag carrier airline after some of its staff took part in the protests currently sweeping Hong Kong. New economic data shows that Hong Kong is now on the brink of its first recession in over a decade, and meanwhile those protests are continuing. Our reporter Charles Pellegrin is there.
Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement gathered in the heart of the city this Friday with a new strategy, a plea of support to the international community. After over 2 months of making their demands and not being heard by the Hong Kong government or Beijing, they're now faced with relative silence from foreign governments.
Actually, at first, we're relying on ourselves because we believe that the government would answer our requests. But then after 2 months of movement, we didn't see any response from the government. And then right now we are actually having involvement, for example, from America.
2 demands have been made this evening. First off, the United Kingdom should declare that the agreement reached with China in 1984 has been breached. That agreement guarantees a high level of autonomy to the territory. Second, the United States should impose financial sanctions on individuals who have suppressed civil liberties in Hong Kong.
We need every kind of support, like people's coming in, even President Donald Trump will going to help us. as it says today. And then hope the United Kingdom will go through some policy about Hong Kong and help Hong Kong.
In the past week or so, Donald Trump has been more vocal about the situation in Hong Kong. He recently tweeted that he thinks Xi Jinping should meet personally right here with protesters. It's unclear that the Chinese president would receive a warm welcome.
Charles Pellegrin in Hong Kong for us there. In other world news today, the United Nations says that Myanmar and Bangladesh are ready to begin voluntary repatriations of Rohingya Muslims. There is no fixed date yet, but over 3,000 people have been earmarked as possible returnees. Now, it's unclear how successful this plan will be because a previous repatriation attempt last year failed. Thomas Waterhouse has the details.
This mishmash of multicoloured roofs is the canopy of the Katu Pelong camp, one of dozens in the Cox's Bazar border region. This is where well over 700,000 Rohingya Muslims have spent the past 2 years after fleeing violence in Myanmar. But over 3,000 of these camps' residents could soon be returning home, with support provided by the UN's refugee agency.
The Bangladesh government has asked UNHCR for its help in working with it to assess the intentions of refugees on that list regarding repatriation and if they want to go back voluntarily. And we will work with the Bangladesh government on that basis.
Myanmar and Bangladesh inked a repatriation deal 2 years ago, but to date, virtually none of the Rohingyas have put their hands up to leave, with a previous repatriation offer rejected last autumn. Progress was made, though, last month, when officials from Myanmar and the Rohingya community met in Bangladesh for what were described as positive talks. The UN also says that times have changed and that most of the Rohingyas they've spoken to do now want to return to their homeland, but they have a long list of preconditions.
They tell us very clearly, we want to go back with our full rights. We want to go back in dignity. We want to have the right of movement, to send our children to school, to have access to hospitals and health services, and to return to our original villages. And they want to see from the Myanmar government that action has been taken towards that end.
The task of trawling through the camps to track down the names on the list is set to begin next week, now that the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha is over.
Next, let's go to Zimbabwe for you, where riot police have used tear gas and batons today to break up protesters in the capital, Harare. Opposition supporters defied a ban to take to the streets today to demonstrate against the country's deteriorating economic situation. Brian Quinn reports.
Riot police in Harare, chasing and beating demonstrators in one of the capital's main squares. Authorities also fired tear gas and used water cannons to disperse hundreds marching in protests organized by the country's main opposition party, the Movement for Democratic Change. A police ban on protests was upheld by the Zimbabwean High Court on Friday.
We are not backing down. We are going forward. The people of Zimbabwe are tired. They are fed up. They want to end this long suffering. So we are proceeding with the marches for a free Zimbabwe.
The MDC accuses President Emerson Mnangagwa's government of corruption, economic mismanagement, and abuse of power. Mnangagwa was elected last year following the ouster of longtime dictator Robert Mugabe on promises of political and economic reform. But the country is now in its worst economic crisis in a decade. The United Nations has urged Zimbabwe's government to do more to address the country's economic woes.
Long-term neglect and structural deficiencies have contributed to hyperinflation, resulting in soaring prices for fuel, food, transport and health services, which is having a dramatic impact on the population and particularly on marginalized working-class people.
Political freedoms have also fared little better under the new government. Human rights groups say state agents are behind the abduction and torture of at least 6 activists this week. The US and the UK have also expressed their concern, even as Harare denies its involvement.
Now, we are not for sale. That was the message from Greenland to Donald Trump this week after it emerged that the US president was considering purchasing the autonomous Danish territory because it has excellent natural resources like coal and zinc. The message from Greenland's foreign ministry today: we are open for business, but not for sale. Finally, here's an unusual way to clean up the planet. Robotic trees. Now, they're being grown by a startup in Mexico. France 24's Karis Garland has been checking them out for us.
Designed to fight the growing problem of air pollution, these robot trees do the same work as 368 real ones. They work by using freshwater microalgae to absorb carbon dioxide and other contaminants in the air.
It is a process of photosynthesis completely natural because it is done by living algae inside the containers that clean this environmental pollution and give back a more oxygenated air to all citizens.
Costing around $50,000, each artificial tree cleans as much as 1 hectare of air. That's what nearly 3,000 people breathe in a day. So far, 3 of them have been installed, 1 in Colombia and Panama, and another here in Puebla, Mexico.
Obviously, the problem is not solved because it only cleans a small amount of air and saves tons, but it cannot clean all of Puebla or this entire area.
The company is building 2 more robotic trees in Turkey and has projects for different cities in Mexico, notably the country's capital, which regularly grinds to a halt under air pollution alerts.
With that, then, you're up to speed with all our top stories on France 24 this hour. Thanks for watching and stay with us.